Welcome back, and let's get into our next lab, creating a medallion architecture in a Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse. This lab should take you approximately 45 minutes to complete if you're fairly new to Microsoft Fabric and the medallion architecture. If not, it can take you a less amount of time. Let's take a look and see how long it will take us. So the first task in this lab is to create a new workspace. So let's go ahead to this workspace icon here and scroll down to the bottom here to plus new workspace. Let's name this workspace DP-700 Lab 6. Make sure that in the advanced section we have selected either the fabric trial or premium capacity or fabric capacity if you have access to those capacities. All right, there you go. We have our workspace created. And then we're going to make some changes to the configuration. So we're going to navigate to workspace settings. You can see the option right here on the top right corner. And we're going to go to Power BI General. And we're going to enable the data model editing setting. So you can see over here, it's already enabled for us. Users can edit data models in the Power BI service, which is still in preview. All right. This will enable us to create relationships between tables in the lakehouse using a Power BI semantic model. Okay. Now that's done. Let's go to the next task. We're going to create a lakehouse and upload data to the bronze layer. That's going to be our first layer in our medallion architecture. So let's go to our workspace and create a new lakehouse. I'm just going to go to the plus new item and I'm going to scroll down to store data and I'm going to pick the lakehouse. Let's create a lakehouse named sales as mentioned in the instructions and create. Now, to ingest data into this lakehouse, we're going to download some data from this GitHub location. I've already done this previously, so we're just going to go ahead to the next step, which is uploading this data, which is three CSV files, 2019, 2020, and 2021, to a new subfolder in the file section called bronze. So let's take a look at how to do that. Here I am in the file section. I'm first going to create a new subfolder and we're going to name it bronze. And in the subfolder, we're going to upload the files. So here we have the orders and I'm just going to select all three files and click on open and let's upload them. All right, there you go. So just to make sure that our data has uploaded correctly, let's click on that bronze folder, subfolder, and you can see we have our three CSV files there. All right, let's go to the next task then. Let's transform this data and load it to the silver delta table. All right. So for this, we're going to open a notebook and we're going to create a new notebook. The great thing of opening up a notebook from within the lakehouse is that the notebook is going to be connected to your lakehouse. So you can see one item is already added and we're already connected to this lakehouse. So we don't need to connect it or do any additional configuration in this notebook. Let's rename our notebook to transform data for silver. So you can see we have the notebook name here. I'm just going to rename it right there. Much better. All right. And let's delete this code here. We won't need this code. And we're going to copy and paste this code in here into our notebook. All right, there you go. So the first thing we're doing in this notebook is we are creating a schema, which we're going to then use to read our CSV files. You can see we're reading all the CSV files from that bronze location that we have created. So let's run this, and we're just going to collapse my lakehouse just to have some more real estate in my notebook. The output should look something like this: index, sales order number, order date, customer name, email, item, quantity, unit price, and tax. Let's make sure that the output looks okay. Yeah, looks good. We also have the email address. Yeah, everything looks good here. Okay. Um, so what we did now is we loaded those CSV files from the bronze folder into a Spark data frame, and we displayed the first few rows. Now let's add some data validation and data cleaning to this notebook. Let's add this new code block here with some new code that's going to do some data validation and some data cleaning as well. So let's run this. So what are we doing in this code block? We're creating new columns called file name is flagged, created timestamp, and then if customer name is null or empty, we are updating the customer name to unknown, for example. Okay, so that's data validation, and here we're just creating some new columns. All right. Next, let's define the schema for our silver delta table. Why do we have a new schema now? Because we do have some new columns added. So obviously our schema is going to change, right? So we're going to be creating a sales silver table here. So let's run this. All right. So with one code cell, what we did is we defined the schema, but also we created a table, right? So in this code, we're not only defining the schema, we're also creating the delta table. It's going to be an empty delta table for now, but we have created that table. We can take a look at this in our tables section. So let's refresh that and make sure we have our sales silver table. And there you go. We have our new sales silver table, which is currently empty. Okay, let's go to the next part. Let's perform an upsert operation to update the existing records based on some specific conditions and insert some new records when no match is found. So let's add this to a new code block, and I'm just going to also okay, this was already fine, so I didn't have to correct the syntax. Okay, so in this one, we're going to do an upsert. So let's run this upsert code. So we are doing updates and inserts at the same time using this code block. It's called an upsert. All right. So now that we are have finished updating our sales silver table, we can now do some further transformation and data modeling. So let's go to the next task: explore data in the silver layer using SQL endpoint. So now for this, we do need to go to the SQL Analytics endpoint. So let's go back to the workspace. And we're going to go to the SQL Analytics endpoint now. And let's create a new SQL query. And let's copy and paste this SQL code provided to us and run it. So you can see we are doing some aggregations here, we're doing some group by, we're doing some ordering. So we want to know the total sales for each year, for example. So let's next review the customers which are purchasing the most. For this, we can either create a new SQL query or just replace the query in the existing SQL query. So I've just created a new SQL query and we can run this as well. There you go. So we now have the list of customers who are purchasing the most. For example, Samantha Jenkins has purchased the most amount of product, for example. Now that we have created our sales silver table and we can use it for some data exploration and basic analysis, we'll need to transform the data a little bit more so that we can create a data model that can be used for more advanced analysis. So let's do that in the next task, which is transforming the data for the gold layer. All right, so up until now, we have successfully taken the data from the bronze layer, transformed it, loaded it into a silver delta table, and now we'll use a new notebook to transform the data even further and load it into a gold delta table. Okay, so let's go to our lakehouse, and let's open a new notebook here this time. And we'll name this notebook Transform Data for Gold. There you go. Make sure our lakehouse is already connected. And let's, as usual, delete this data from here. And we're going to copy the code we have from here. And I'm also going to collapse this so we can see this a little better. And the first thing we're going to do is read the data from our silver table, because that's our starting point for now to move into the gold layer. All right. In the meantime, while that runs, let's create a new code cell and add the next code block, which is defining the schema for the dimension date gold table. All right. There you go. So we have loaded that, and now we're creating an empty table. We're not adding anything into this table yet. We're just creating an empty table. There you go. All right. So we're going to run the next code cell, which is finally going to add some data into this table. Okay, and let's run this. All right, and now you can see we've finally added some data into our dimension date gold table. Okay, now let's move on to the next piece of code, which is updating the dimension table as and when new data comes in. So this first one would be the first initial load into your dimension table. And then we also need to make sure we can update the data or load new data. So doing an upsert, if you may, for new data or updated data that comes into our dimension date table. All right, so now our dimension date dimension has been set up. Let's move on to the next dimension table, which is the customer dimension table. So again, first create an empty delta table called dim customer gold. And in the next code cell, we'll finally add some data to it. And let's run this as well. Okay, so this is what our data looks like. We have the name of the customers, the email address, the first name, and the last name. Next, let's create some IDs for our customers so that we can create relationships between our main table, our main fact table, and our dimension tables. So we have some code here which is going to create some logic to create these IDs. All right, so we have a customer ID column created, which is very good. And then to top it all off, we're going to just do an upsert like we did for the dimension date table. We're going to do a similar upsert for the customer dimension table. All right. Now let's repeat these steps for the next dimension table, which is a product dimension table. Create an empty product dimension table. And then we're going to add some data from the silver table. There you go. And then let's create some IDs for the products as well, so we can create those relationships. And to top it all off, let's do the final upsert for this product dimension table. All right, so now we have built our dimension. We have three dimensions. We have the date, the customer, and the product dimension. The only thing left is to create our fact table. So let's do that. We're going to create an empty delta table again, but this time for our fact table. So it's going to be called fact sales gold. And we're going to get the data from our silver table in the next code block. And then we're going to make sure that our data is up to date by doing an upsert for the sales table as well. And with that, we have created our gold layer for our data model. So let's look at the tables we have created. So we have the sales silver, and now we have these four tables, which are our gold layer tables. We have three dimension tables and one fact table. All right. Last but not the least, let's create a semantic model. Now that we have our tables. Note that we are not going to be using the default semantic model, which is automatically created. We must create a new semantic model that includes the gold tables created in this exercise. So let's navigate to our lakehouse. And here we have a nice button in the lakehouse for a new semantic model. And the name of the semantic model will be sales gold, for example. And we're going to select only the four tables that we have just created. We're not going to include the silver table here. And we're going to confirm. Once we have created our semantic model, we can then create relationships between our different tables. So I'm just going to collapse these different panes, and I'm just going to bring our fact table down here, and then we can create some relationships. For example, customer ID with customer ID. This should be a many to one relationship. Looks good. Let's try that again. Many to one relationship. There you go. And here we have the date, order date, and order date. So let's do that. Order date and order date. This is going to be a one-to-many relationship because the dimension table is first. There you go. And here we have an item ID. So this is going to be a many to one relationship because the fact table is first. And there you go. We have our gold layer semantic model. All right. And with that, we have come to the end of this lab. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another one.